Wagwan. Good morning, good night, welcome back. And if you're listening for the first time, welcome to episode 5 of The Real Situation, where we give you a taste of Jamaican politics, focusing in this series on Jamaica's journey to becoming a republic. I'm your host, Melanie Byfield, and I do want to start by sending a whole heap of love and prayers for those who were affected and those who are still affected by Hurricane Beryl in Jamaica and anywhere else that was in its path. The journey continues, although this one's a doctor's visit, got me sick. But I'd miss this journey too much, so me there. I'm going to do my best to hold it down, but you have to allow me if I cough, all right? Okay, so Jamaica's journey to becoming a republic. We're a couple of weeks off, actually, from independence celebrations, and not sure if you saw yesterday, but we have a new festival song. Winner. Song bad. Love it. I watched them from the time I heard this song. I knew it was going to be a winner. The lady's name is Camila Isaacs, but she's called Candy, and the song was called One Jamaica. And check out these lyrics, some of the lyrics. We've come a long way, standing in a strong way. We never give up on God, 'cause him not give up on we. Out of many we are one nation, one family. We have to gain rising faith and joyfully celebrate one Jamaica. Spell it right? All right, yes, we've come a long way as Jamaicans, because we know as Africans our history didn't start with slavery, but for the island of Jamaica, we stand on the shoulders of some very strong men and women who started the journey that we are continuing. I watched this show called Who Do You Think You Are? With Naomi Harris. She plays Moneypenny in the latest James Bond movies. Her mother's Jamaican, and so her part of the show was about the show's about tracing your ancestors generally, but it was showing her tracing her mother's Jamaican line, right? So as it happens, through various records, she was able to trace back 6 generations in Jamaica to a document which actually showed her 6th line ancestor from Africa. I'm sitting there say Africa, right? And in her case, it was Nigeria, to be specific, because when she did this DNA test, it showed that she was 40-something% Nigerian. It was interesting and emotional, because she vexed because one of her ancestors was an overseer, and she cried when she saw records showing that another one of her ancestors died in a poorhouse. The historian was, very nice. She was trying to comfort her and everything, telling her things are not the way they used to be. They went through some rough times, knowing that they wouldn't see the benefits of their sacrifices. We would. We stand on the shoulders of our ancestors who were captured from Africa and brutally enslaved for hundreds of years. Gained freedom but lived in such deplorable conditions. All in a situation where they have like 6 picnic, maybe 2 survive. Past maybe a few months old. Where children are snatched off the street and put in reformatory schools, and I say that in quotes, but were really prisons, under the pretense of learning a trade, under what was a new version of slavery. Where our heroes like George William Gordon, Paul Bogle and Samuel Sharp are our heroes because they were brutally executed fighting for the freedoms we enjoy today. We have come a long way. standing in a strong way. But the journey's not over. On August 6th, Jamaica is going to be 62 years old as an independent country and is on the way transitioning from a constitutional monarchy to a constitutional republic. Why? Because the highest representative of Jamaica is an English king. The 1962 Constitution that granted Jamaica independence and which represents the highest law of the land is a colonial document. And Jamaica's highest court of appeal is the Privy Council in London. So right now we're in the first of 3 phases, which should fully decolonize Jamaica. That'd make sense, right? So phase 1. Phase 1 is to focus on the repatriation of the Constitution, the abolition of the constitutional monarchy, the establishment of Jamaica as a republic, and all matters within the deeply entrenched provisions of the Constitution for which a referendum is required. Phase 2 is to look at the wording and provisions of the Charter of Fundamental Rights and Freedoms set out in Chapter 3 and the ordinarily entrenched provisions of the Constitution for which amendments are desired and required. And then Phase 3 is to focus on fully assessing the country's legal and constitutional infrastructure. So right now we're in Phase 1, focusing on changes to fully entrenched provisions of the Constitution, right? So that means removing the king, removing the monarchy, King Charles, as the head of state and replacing him with a Jamaican head of state who the Constitutional Reform Committee are proposing is a president. Right, we're also amending the colonial instrument known as the Second Schedule of the Jamaica, in parentheses, Constitution, Order in Council 1962, under the West Indies Act 1962, and Jamaicanize it into a constitution by the people, for the people, and becoming the Constitution of Jamaica. And to hold a referendum for people of Jamaica to say yes or no to the proposed amendments to the Constitution, which is required because they are deeply entrenched. Right? So where those who are eligible to vote will say yes or no. And by the way, Jamaica produces a voters list twice a year. Right? The deadline to register for the November 30 voters list is on September 30th, right? So you need to register to vote by September 30th to make sure that you're on that November 30 voters list, right? If you miss that one for some reason, the next deadline is March 31, and that is the deadline to register for the May 31 voters list. So, that's phase 1, but some people feel like phase 1 is incomplete, right? There's a very strong argument that you can't remove the monarchy without removing the Privy Council as Jamaica's final court of appeal, because then Jamaica would be fully decolonized. The Constitutional Reform Committee, the 15 of them, submitted a report in May this year with recommendations that's been tabled in Parliament as a ministry paper, right? The opposition leader didn't sign, the representatives of the opposition didn't sign the report, right? And Mark Golding, the opposition leader, prepared a document that gave the reasons why the opposition were in agreement with certain parts of the report. And of course, the big one, where bust the tire, is the final court of appeal. But let me give you an example of why Jamaica wouldn't be fully decolonized staying with the Privy Council. So when you look at a judgment made by the Privy Council, I looked at a case. It was a case from the Court of Appeal of Jamaica in 2023. First of all, it's got a royal seal that's in the top hand the top left-hand corner of the document, right? And then the final paragraph of that judgment says, and I quote, "For the reasons given above, the board will humbly advise His Majesty that the appeal should be dismissed." So basically, the monarchy is interpreting Jamaican law at the highest level. That's what the objection is to the Privy Council remaining as Jamaica's highest court of appeal. So yeah, the Porsche still park up and the tyre still bust, because there's no consensus on what Jamaica's final court of appeal should be, it would appear. All right, so I'll go on in the meantime. Public education. There's a public education campaign that's continuing about the contents of this report. The recommendations are not final, so you can still make submissions, and you should still be making submissions if you have them that you want to make, to the Ministry of Legal and Constitutional Affairs. There was a webinar which took place. It was actually two of them. One took place on July 8th and the other one took place on July 10th. I actually participated in the one on July 8th, and it was called a Road to Republic webinar. The primary hosts were Dr. Nadine Spence. She is one of the CRC members, and she is a civil society, social and political commentator. And then the other primary host was a gentleman called Ivan Godfrey, and he is a legal education officer at the Ministry of Legal and Constitutional Affairs. I'm going to call it MLCA for short, yeah? Okay. So what was it about? They talked about basically various sections of the report. They talked about the Constitution, the life of Parliament, composition of the Senate, the Court of Appeal issue, the qualifications that are required to vote in a referendum, and the exclusion of an impeachment clause. I mean, should that really get excluded? And I ask that question because what is an impeachment, right? Impeachment is a process where you bring charges against a government official for wrongdoing, right? It's a constitutional, not a criminal, it's a constitutional remedy. The criminal is separate. A constitutional remedy to address a serious offence against the government. So there's an argument, right? Oh, it's just used for political game playing. Not necessarily. Here's some examples. I'm not going to give specifics, but I'm going to give you a few countries that have brought impeachment proceedings against government officials of varying levels, right? So, for example, in the US, impeachment proceedings have been brought in cases of incitement of insurrection, abuse of power, and obstruction of Congress. Serious something, right? Okay. Brazil, impeachment proceedings have been brought for violation of budgetary laws, regarding the peaceful transition of power. Paraguay, improper land purchase. Philippines, corruption. Venezuela, embezzlement. Peru, moral incapacity and treason. Don't really sound like political game playing, right? So yeah, impeachment is not necessarily simple something. So back to the webinar. So they also made reference to town hall meetings that were made over, and I quote, the length and breadth of Jamaica, end quote. But I digress, and I feel like the MLCA is just going to work, they're going to have to work a little harder on that one. There's 14 parishes, and 5 comes up short, whatever way you want to swing it, right? So they just need, more town halls. Okay, so then at the end, there was a question and answer session, which was, pretty good. A great variety of questions were asked. And people were able to submit questions through chat, right, throughout the webinar. But, some of the questions that were asked were, is 7 years too long for a president's term? How is a president held accountable or removed from office? A retirement age for parliamentarians and term limits for parliamentarians. And, so there's a whole bunch of matters that are still being discussed. And again, Miss Nadine Spence did confirm that the report is not final. They're recommendations, right? So submissions can and should still be made to the MLCA. So what else took place? And I'm not pretending that this is exhaustive. These are just things that I've seen, right? So what else took place? There was a presentation at the Church of God in Duini Park, St. Thomas. That was on June 27. And these webinars, presentations, etc. are very well advertised. I have seen them on the ministry and the Rotary Public's Instagram pages. So if you're looking for things of that nature, that's a good place to look for them, right? What's in the pipeline? So on July 25, there's a town hall that's going to be held at Emancipation Park in St. Andrew. There wasn't a time specified, but the minute I see it on the ministry's social media, I will post it on my Instagram and Facebook, which is A Taste of JA. It has a Jamaican flag, so Sami that. Public education. So what else can be done? I mean, there's 180 high schools. High school students stay in school now until they're 18, right? So you have students in that 17, 18 age range where, presentations can be made, to that, to that group. Again, town halls need to be in every parish. As I've said before, there doesn't have to be a full panel of CRC members. There's 15 of them and there's 14 parishes. So kind of like what they did with the webinar. And Miss Spence, Ms. Nadine Spence was there. I think she was the only CRC representative. So, they can spread out and have others on the panel with them, MPs, mayors, school principals, teachers, police, local doctors, pastors, prefects. They can mix it up so they're not in the same parish. And work with local government officials, work with churches, schools, for example, and keep the discussion continuing, because people have a lot to say, right? The voice of the public matters, right? So, my friends, that's our public education update. And, I did say that this was going to be a doctor's visit, right? But I do hope that, you're continuing to enjoy this journey, finding it educational, useful. And I look forward to our continued travels on this road to Jamaica becoming not only a republic, but truly independent and sovereign. So, yes, the tire's still flat, but we're going to get it fixed. 1JAMAICA. You can find this podcast on Buzzsprout, on Spotify, Podcast Index, Deezer, Podcast Addict, Apple, iHeartRadio, and Amazon Music. And of course, if you want to reason about anything, or if you are having trouble finding any of the information, that I've given in this podcast, maybe if you want to tune into one of the, the webinars that were mentioned, you can email me. It's atasteofja@outlook.com. So until the next time, I thank you again for supporting this podcast, and, please share it with family and friends. And again, I thank you for taking the time to listen. We've come a long way, standing in a strong way. One Jamaica. One love.